everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that was very successful on Kickstarter. From what I hear, had quite the buzz at Essen, and is now in the hands of a lot of the backers out there. That game is Clans of Caledonia from Karma Games, and Juma Al-JouJou. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. I'm not great with pronunciation, as I think has been exhibited by several of my last videos. Now, this is a game where each player represents a Scottish clan out on the fields trying to produce goods, sell those goods at market, fulfill various export contracts, import goods, and just all around, become more prestigious. Each of their clans will have a special ability. The game is reminiscent somewhat of Terra Mystica, but real quick, why don't we take a look at how this game plays, and we'll come back at the end and get my opinions on Clans of Caledonia. So here you can see the setup for Clans of Caledonia. Now, what you'll notice right away is that there's a lot of pieces here, and there's going to be a lot of different moving aspects to this game. Just looking at a player board here, you can see that they have pieces for sheep and cows and cheese and bread and wheat and whiskey, and then two different types of workers that go out on the board. And that's just their starting stuff. They also have some merchants and some starting goods, but we've done a little bit of setup prior to the game. One is everybody has drafted a clan. These clans will give you a special ability for the game. They're not game breaking, but they do change your strategies. So this player here happens to start with 3 guys out on the board instead of the normal 2, but he is forced to start the game at the edges. He's also going to start with extra shipping steps. So his shipping ability is up 3 steps at the start of the game, making him a little bit more versatile and expanding on the board, and also helping him in endgame scoring. Other abilities may give you benefits in the market, or change it so that when you make milk, it's actually better to sell the milk than it is to turn it into cheese, giving you a little bit of a different strategy there. So overall, that's going to change how you play the game just a little. When you draft these, you will also get a starting goods tile. So this player is starting with 2 milk and 1 whiskey, as well as $55. Now, they don't currently have $55 because when you start the game, you actually have to pay for the location of your starting guys. So this guy has put out a forester, a mountaineer, and another mountaineer. Now that's going to cost him 10 plus $1 because of the location of the tile. So 10 for the mountaineer and 1 for the mountain is 11. Another 10 and 1 for this mountaineer, and another 6 and 1 for this. So it cost him $29 to start the game. Every other player has also done this, paying for their starting area. So we're ready to go. Now, the way this game is going to work is you're going to go through several different phases, and the first phase is a preparation. You don't do it in the first round because we've already prepared the game, but at the beginning of each round, you would actually flip over the previous scoring tile and replenish these tiles that you see out here. After that, you're going to move on, and you're going to move on to the step where you start taking actions. So, when you take your actions, each player has several options of what they can do. Actually, a multitude of options. And so let's cover them all really briefly. You'll see out here we have this dynamic market, and this market is going to allow you to sell wool or wheat or milk or bread or cheese or whiskey that you may have in order to get money. You may also buy from here, so it's going to be a way that you can get resources without having to produce them. When you go here, you're going to use your merchants, and you'll start the game with some merchants. This player starts with 2. They may acquire more. They can send these merchants 1 for 1 to buy or sell goods. So this player has some milk. Say he wanted to go and sell his milk. He would place a merchant underneath milk. He would get $5 for his milk, selling it back, taking the $5, and this would move the market down because milk is now in less demand. Correspondingly, if he had sold 2 milk by sending 2 there, it would have gone down twice, but he would have gotten $5 for each milk before it went down. The same is true when buying. It would go up for the number of those that were bought, increasing the demand and thus increasing the cost for the milk. Now, you can only buy and sell as many things as you have merchants. So if I were to do both of my milk right off the bat, I would no longer have any merchants to use this round. Also, you may not buy and sell the same thing in the same round because you're not allowed to manipulate the market like that. The next action you can take is to take one of these contracts, and these are going to be a major way of getting points and other resources throughout the game. Now, the way that these are bought or acquired changes as the game progresses. In the first round, you actually get paid $5 for taking a contract. And you'll take a contract and you put it in this little box over here. And you may only have 1 contract at a time unless you're the player that can have more than 1. In doing so, I would earn myself $5, but I've locked myself into finishing this contract. As the game progresses, you will then get $0. So you get a free contract, and later in the game rounds, they'll become more and more expensive to take these contracts, but you need to do so, or might want to do so, in order to score points. Another action you can do, of course, is to fulfill these contracts. So once you've acquired the goods for them, which you'll see a little bit later, is to turn those goods in order to get what's on the right-hand side of the contract. So needs on the left, and then benefits on the right. So the contract we took requires a meat, a wool, and 2 whiskey, and when we turn it in, there's going to be 4 tobacco imported, and we're going to get $3. You can also earn things like sugarcane, or cotton, or free placements out onto the board, or hops. And so there's a variety of things you can get here. Now, some of them are tangible and some of them are not. Things like money is tangible. Things like the placement is kind of tangible because it lets you build a building onto the board without paying for the location. But things like hops, or cotton, or sugarcane, or tobacco aren't tangible things that you earn, but rather imports that happen in the game, or end game victory points. So, in the case of this one, if we were to complete it, we'd get our $3, we would have our 4 tobacco, and that means that 4 tobacco were imported in the game. This is important because the position of these markers and the number that you've caused to be imported will be important for endgame scoring. Now, the majority of the game actually takes place with the expansion action, or the expanding action, which is what lets you build these different buildings and people out onto the board. When you're expanding, at the basic level, you must expand adjacent to where you're at. So, for example, white could expand to any of these spaces here, or these ones up here. But if you don't have shipping ability, you cannot expand across water. As you increase your shipping ability, you can then expand across these little rivers, and eventually you can expand further and further down. So if he had a shipment of 2, for example, 2 hexes, he could ship across these 2 hexes and over to here. Or as the blue player does have a shipping of 2, across these 2 hexes and over to here. Now, when you expand, you are simply choosing what type of building you would like to build, or what type of resource. So sheep, cows, cheese, bread, wheat, whiskey, or any of the 2 resource productions. Most of these must be built on plains. As a matter of fact, everything but the forester and the mountaineer must be built on an area that has some plains. This, for example, being a mountain and a plain. This, for example, being a forest, a mountain, and a plain. When you build them, you're going to pay the cost for that resource. For example, $8 for a sheep. And if Blue wanted to build this sheep here, for example, he can because he can build across rivers with his starting shipping. He would pay $11 to build that sheep right there. And later, when we got to production, he would produce some wool. Sheep produce wool, cows produce milk, the cheese places will convert milk into cheese, the bread places will convert wheat into bread, the wheat produces bread, the whiskey will convert wheat into whiskey, and then the foresters and the mountaineers will allow you to earn money. Foresters giving you less money than mountaineers. Now, there are some special rules surrounding building, and they're called neighbor rules. Now, let's say, for example, earlier, white had decided to build this wheat out onto the board, which will produce 2 wheat for them when it comes time to do production. In a future turn, red decides that they're going to build a cow right here, so they'll pay their $9 plus $4, $13 to build a cow out onto this field. In doing so, they have built next to one of white's buildings, and this allows them the ability to purchase some of this wheat that's being produced from the market at a reduced cost, kind of like buying it from the white player, but they actually pay the bank. So when this happens, red may buy wheat from the market. Okay, well, let's look over here. Wheat currently has a price of 5, but the neighbor bonus says that I may buy 3 wheat for up to $2 off per wheat. That means that I could buy 3 wheat for $3 each. If I do so, I must send my merchants to the market just as normal, buy my 3 wheat for $3 each, and it goes up 3 in price. So now I've paid $9 for 3 wheat, but the future price for wheat is $7 per. The last 3 actions that are capable of being taken in the game are all about upgrading your own resources that are available to you. So, one is that you may spend $4 to buy an additional merchant. As you can tell, this will allow you to do additional buys and sells out here for resources you may need to acquire, oftentimes for converting them to other resources during production or for fulfilling a contract. The next one you may do is you may spend $4 to increase your shipping. This will be important for building, as you may want to expand away from your own area to build next to other players, and for endgame scoring, which we'll cover shortly. And the last thing you can do is you may spend $10 to upgrade your workers, and this will be important for producing money. So you can spend $10 to upgrade your woodsmen or your foresters here, and they'll produce more money during production. And you can spend $10 to upgrade your mountaineers, which will also cause them to produce more money. So This is kind of a pay now for benefit later. Once everyone is done with their actions, or everyone decides to pass, and when you pass, you'll move down to the leftmost position and take the associated money with that passing, $16, $14, $12, or $10. Once everyone has passed, we will move on to a production phase. In production phase, you're going to earn money. And you're going to earn money based on the guys that you've placed out on the board. Just your workers here, the foresters and the mountaineers. Unupgraded, each forester on the board will give you $4. Each mountaineer will give you $6. However, if you've upgraded either of them, the upgraded foresters provide 6 per, and the upgraded mountaineers provide 8 per. After you've gotten your income, you're going to go on to production of basic goods. And the basic goods are wool, wheat, and milk. So for each of these wheat you have out, you'll actually produce 2 of the wheat resource here to put into your own stockpile. For each cow you have out, you'll produce 1 milk, and for each sheep you have out, you'll produce 1 wool. Then, after you've done that, you're going to move on to your advanced resource production. And that's where you get things like cheese, whiskey, and bread. Now, for each milk that you have, and if you have an associated, cheesery, you're able to convert 1 milk into 1 cheese for each cheesery you have on the board. Same is true for bread. For each bakery you have on the board, you may convert 1 wheat to 1 bread. And for each of the distilleries you have on the board, you may convert 1 wheat to 1 whiskey. So this is how you get the advanced resources. After production, we're going to go on to the scoring portion of each round, and that's what these tiles are here. So at the end of the first round, for every 2 of the advanced goods you have, cheese, bread, and whiskey, you're going to score 3 victory points. The next round would be for each upgrade you have, and that counts each of the merchants you've bought, each of the shipping steps you've gotten, and each of the 2 money upgrades that you can get will be worth 1 victory point. This one here is 1 victory point for each of the basic goods that you have, or 2 victory points for each 5 or 6 cost land that you've built on. And these will change from game to game, but there's 1 scoring in each round. At the end of the game, you're going to score some additional things. So after all of these rounds are done, you're going to score based on this little score sheet here. So the first thing you get is any victory points you've earned in-game. Those can be from a variety of different things, but most of the time you'll get them for completing contracts or a variety of other things that you've managed to accomplish. Then you're going to score 1 victory point for each leftover basic resource and 2 victory points for each leftover advanced resource you have. Each $10 will be worth 1 victory point, and then you're going to score for hops. So some of these contracts, as you can see, have values of hops on them. Each hops that you've gotten from fulfilling these contracts is worth that number of points. So 7 hops is worth 7 points. Then we get on to the import goods. And so let's just say that our import goods looked something like this. You are going to see which one of these import goods is the most rare. So tobacco was imported the least because there's only 4 of them. For the least popular good, you're going to score 5 points per tobacco that you imported. So our player earlier had imported the only 4 tobacco imported in the game. That's going to score him 20 points. The second most common will be worth 4 points per one that you imported, and the third most common, or the most common I should say, will be worth only 3 points per one that you imported on your tiles. Then we'll move on to seeing who completed the most of the contracts, and that will be worth 12 points for most completed contracts, 6 points for second place. And then the final thing you score is based on separate clans on the board. Now, how do you tell what a separate clan is? So these 2 adjacent tiles are 1 clan. If I were to have built across this river because I'd increased my shipping, now these are no longer directly adjacent. So this is 2 clans. If I had a shipping, for example, and I already got a guy over here, so he's my 3rd clan, but he's not reachable from the other clans because he's in no way connected via water or via land across a river. So if I had somehow managed to use my shipping to build across this water and place this here, I can now reach this from the water, and I have 1, 2, 3 clans that are all reachable by one another, but separated from physical land area. So whichever player has best managed to separate their clans across water but make them accessible via shipping and has the most of these is going to get 18 points. Second will be 12 and third will be 6. In this manner, whoever manages to accumulate the most points both in-game and by strategizing for the end of the game will be the winner. And there you have it. That is Clans of Caledonia from Karma Games. Now, this was one I was very excited about, and I must say that it did live up to my beliefs for it. So I had played it once on Tabletopia before I got the game, which was while the Kickstarter was running. I was pretty excited about it then, and drew a lot of comparisons to Terra Mystica, and I think online was calling it kind of Terra Mystica Light. And having played it several more times, while it is a little bit lighter than Terra Mystica, and it does share quite a few things with it, it's certainly not the same game, and it's not necessarily as light as I thought it was. So there's several aspects of this that you're trying to balance. I think the most important ones, and my wife and I were discussing this, are both, one, completing as many contracts as possible, and I think this has been a very strong strategy from the plays that we've seen, the multiple plays that we've seen. Getting a lot of contracts done tends to win the game. So if you can find a good way to do that, be it expanding yourself, probably the best way to do it, or best manipulating the market by building next to other people and buying things for cheap, you're going to get a lot of points and probably win the game. A very strong aspect of this is those import goods. So paying attention to those import goods, I think, is worth quite a few points. If you can import the majority of, for example, tobacco, but have tobacco be the least common import good, you could easily score, I don't know, 35 points or so from doing this if there's really been a lot of import contracts done throughout the game. So there's a lot of focus on that aspect of the contracts. And if you get the guy that can do 2 contracts and do it and play it right, I played it way wrong, I think you could do very well there. Each of those clans gives you a different kind of overall focus for the game, but isn't going to change the general aspects of how do I best expand myself across the board, use the neighborhood or neighbor benefits, and finish contracts in order to get those end game points, because the in-game accumulation of points to me seems rather inconsequential. The scoreboard only goes to 30. You can get beyond 30, but I don't think you're going to get most of that in-game. One thing I did skip over is there are a couple of corner placements of ports that when you've built into the shipping or adjacent to those port ranges, you can get a special ability once per game. They're pretty powerful, they give you a pretty good benefit, and it's something to take into account, but you don't want to get distracted by doing them, because if you do, you're going to miss out on some other aspect like, say, optimally expanding yourself across the board. So overall, this is a heavier game than I was expecting. It has some similarities to Terra Mystica, but mostly in that building out onto the board and building adjacent to other people for a benefit. Overall, a little bit lighter, but I think a good amount of strategy there. So if you enjoy variable markets where things are going up and down, finding the best way to get the resources good for you, definitely check this one out. It's Clans of Caledonia from Karma Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.